Well, hi everyone. My name is Melissa Thomas, and I'm the Senior Director of Campus Relations at GoBoard. I have been working on GoBoard for almost 4 years now, and it's so exciting to see everybody here. Elizabeth actually had this great idea that we should host some GoBoard training for all of our tutors, and we do a lot of support for the Learning Center directors and those kind of, in the administrative positions, but we haven't done a lot of direct training with you guys. And so we were excited to give this a go. And we had our first round last week. I thought it went really well. So I'll be showing off GoBoard, some of the tips and tricks and things that I've learned. I actually tutor on GoBoard. So I have firsthand experience of what it's like. Now, I will say I do mainly one-to-one tutoring. So, but I'll talk a little bit about group tutoring and some strategies for that as well. So, all right, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And when you get to GoBoard, just making sure that you get to GoBoard through your institutional URL. So remember that if you just go to goboard.com, you can make a GoBoard, but it's only going to last 30 minutes. And also it's not being recorded for your school. So your school's not going to be able to see that you were working during that time. So you want to make sure that if you have a, I don't know, Louisville.goboard.com or, whatever university.goboard.com URL, that you use that URL. Northern.goboard.com is our pretend university. So that's the one that I'll use. And I will just go ahead and click create a new GoBoard. If I have an existing GoBoard ID, that's the 6 alphanumeric combination, I can just enter that here. So I literally could type 7F whatever, and I could go into the board, or I could create a fresh GoBoard. The links are persistent, so you can come back to that board, and that's how we created GoBoard, was that every time a tutor and student met, they would come back to the same board and they could build their knowledge, right? They could add more and more pages and more content in there. Now, some of your schools aren't using it that way, and that's perfectly fine, but that's how we made it to be used. So when you go to click or create a new GoBoard, you have two choices. I'm a tutor, I'm a student. You're going to want to pick I'm a tutor. There's a few things that you get, some extra bells and whistles when you pick I'm a tutor. If you pick I'm a student, then it's going to show you in the student report on the admin side. So you want to make sure that your students that you're working with pick I'm a student. They put their name and their email address. They put their email address so they can get that PDF of this session after it's over, which is a really helpful study tool for them. So you pick I'm a tutor, and you have one of 4 ways of logging in. You can log in with Facebook. We now have Apple login, Google, or you can create a login. So, but once you're logged in, it's going to auto route you back to the board, and that's great. So here I can check my camera. If I have multiple cameras, I can actually pick the drop down and pick which camera I want to use. I know some people have an external camera and a built-in camera. Same with like microphones and headphones and things like that. You want to make sure that you've got the right ones picked. We recommend just some plain old simple connected headphones. AirPods tend to die in the middle of a tutoring session. They also sometimes have connectivity issues. So these cheap, $10 headphones that you can get are the best kind. You just want to make sure that they have a microphone in it. Not all of them do. It needs to have 3 dashes on the prong side that sticks into your laptop in order for it to have a microphone. A few things to note, there's a new to GoBoard tab. You want to make sure that you're using GoBoard in either Firefox, Chrome, or Safari. You also want to make sure you're using an updated browser. So you can always check that out at whatsmybrowser.com, and it'll tell you whether you have the most updated browser. Again, having headphones is smart. Maximize the size of your window for sure. It would be nice to have things prepared in the GoBoard for the student before you have them come in. At least a note that says like, hi, Elizabeth, or something like that, so they know they're in the right place, especially if they've never used GoBoard before. They might be a little nervous and they might wonder if they're in the right location. So you can use just your trackpad on your laptop. You could use a mouse if you have a real mouse. You could also use a pen mouse, which is pretty cool. And it's basically a mouse in the shape of a pen. And it lets you have a little bit more fine control over the mouse. You can use a stylus, a Wacom, or a tablet, a Weon. Those are like little tablets that you can plug in. And then of course you can use the stylus, like if you're on the iPad, you can use Safari and your Apple Pencil, which is a pretty cool experience. And then you're going to want to make sure that you've got pretty decent internet connection, because this is a browser-based application. You're going to want to make sure that you've closed out other things that you're doing. You can't be downloading videos in the background or uploading whatever. You really do need to make sure that your computer is ready to go and that you've got the best connection possible. And you can test that at speedtest.net. At this point, you could invite someone to join you. So I could send an email actually. And so I will send an email to Elizabeth. So she's going to get a really nice email that says like, hey, you've been invited to this GoBoard. It actually comes from GoBoard. So it's one way that if you don't want to share your personal email address with students, it's an easy way for you to send that. So you could also invite them by Facebook message, but I don't think that that's a very popular or well-used feature. I'll tell you that. So a lot of times you're using like Tutor Track or, some sort of system that you've already got in place. All right, so we're going to go ahead and go in. So we've got our audio and video up here. So here we are. I'm going to go ahead and turn myself off, which is easy to do. And then I can make sure that, I'm there. I see Elizabeth is there. We'll have Elizabeth turn off her audio video as well. And then we won't get crazy feedback because doing Zoom and GoBoard, it gets a little wild. So, but it's nice to see where they're going to pop up and how they look on the screen. And the other piece to think about is in terms of screen sharing. So if Elizabeth was going to share her screen, then she would pick this icon, which is right below the microphone, and it'll ask her like, do you want to share your entire screen or just an application window or a tab? And if you're going to share a tab, there's the checkbox if you want to share your audio. So Elizabeth, do you want to go ahead? Yeah, there you go, sharing a screen. So I can make that larger just by clicking on that little X in the bottom corner. And so now her screen share is huge, right? And there's the email I sent her, so thanks. But I can also go one more down and we can actually split screen. So now her and I can be maybe looking at a problem in her math homework on the right, but we can be working on the GoBoard on the left. The reason you might want to do that is because anything that's written on the GoBoard is contained in that PDF. But if you do screen sharing, that's not going to be saved in that PDF. So it's actually really smart to bring problems into the board, either by handwriting them, or she could take a screenshot and then we could upload it to the board. But in order to make that PDF really valuable for the students when the session's over, it's a good idea to bring, whatever you're working on to the board. So we can do, our math homework over here, and I can show her, my favorite math problem, which is very easy to do on Thursday at 4 o'clock. But we can show her that there, and then that's going to then be saved as part of her PDF. So when, when you're done and you don't want to do the screen sharing anymore, I can shrink that back up. She can stop screen sharing on her part, and then that clears that up. The other thing I wanted to show is the chat. So I can chat with her, she can chat with me. That's also saved as part of the PDF. So anything that you send in the PDF will come through. And you'll get an auditory ding that there's a chat message. And that's a really nice thing to, because I'm not always looking at the chat all the time, but she might want to chat me. A few other things to consider, I had mentioned like maybe having a welcoming message. It could just be literally as simple as like, welcome, Elizabeth. Like, that's it. I mean, even if I had that on the board, that's better than just staring at a big blank board. The other thing I wanted to show before I have Elizabeth disappear is we want, see this big dashed line. So this actually shows the different screen sizes and what people can see on their screen. So if I work on this side of this dotted line, or maybe on this side, then Elizabeth can see it. But if I'm working on this side, then she can't see it. And so that's really important to know, that you don't want to be writing in an area that your student.
Poor guy. Come on.
So you don't want to be writing in an area that your student can't see. So just make sure that you're staying on the left-hand side of that dash line. And this is just how we compensate for, some people have really large screens, some people are working on smaller scale iPads, right? And we've got to figure out how to, compensate for that. So cool. All right. So we've talked through the major buttons and kind of know where to find things on the page. Hopefully you know that you can add pages and that you can edit those pages. So this could be on chapter 1 and this could be on chapter 2. So we can do that. We can also add tabs. Right now, the tab option doesn't show up until you've actually added 8 pages, which is sort of a hassle. And so we're moving it up to the top. We know that. We added tabs in the fall. So for those of you who tutored in the fall, you probably saw the tabs appear. We decided to not add the tabs right away at the top. But see, now I can add a tab. So you have an 8-page limit, and that's because of the kerning. We know that 8 pages is about what the computer can handle in terms of like smoothly transitioning, where, everything loads really beautifully and we're not losing any of that, while we load. But you have 10 tabs and 8 pages. So you actually have 80 pages to work on, which is a lot. And so if you fill that up, then good job. Go ahead and export it as a PDF, and then you can clear it and start over. But you do have a lot of room. And then the tabs can be renamed as well. So it's possible that if you wanted to organize things this way, and then when the PDF is saved, this is actually saved with it. So, so it'll organize the PDF and it'll have the labels for each of the tabs and the pages. So lots of capacity there. So, all right. So basic tools, you have your pen tool, which you guys know, and you have lots of different colors. I would recommend, if you're doing group tutoring, that you have everybody pick a different color. That would make life a lot easier, and you'll be able to tell who's doing what. The other thing to think about is, if you're doing group tutoring, you might actually want to take the page and divide it into fourths. So you might want to come in and say, okay, Elizabeth, you can write in this piece, and George, you can write in this piece, and Sue, you can write in this, and trying to get them to kind of, stay within their lane. Because remember, we created GoBoard as a very equitable learning environment. There's no batons to pass. There's nothing, right? All tutors and all students, everyone on the board has equal access and opportunity. So if one of the students decides to take you down to page 4, you're all going down to page 4, whether you like it or not. So that's really important for us to know and for us to remember. So it's a good conversation when you're having group tutoring to kind of say that, like, hey guys, we're all going to stay on this page, because when one person starts moving around, it actually moves everybody.
Melissa, we have a couple of questions about the tabs.
Yeah.
One is about deleting, which I think is in the works. It is not currently available, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So on that one, you can rename them, but you will be able to delete them in the future. And the other one was about tutoring multiple subjects. Could you use different tabs for that?
So you could. You would just have to be toggling back and forth quite a bit, and your students would be, everybody goes where everybody goes, right? So it's not like you can have one student over on one tab and another student over on another tab. So it's not actually the best way to do that. If you're trying to have multiple subjects, it's smarter to have different GoBoards. So if I'm trying to tutor George in economics, I'm going to have one GoBoard with him, and then I would just go ahead and open up another GoBoard for Elizabeth if I want to help her in calculus or something. So it's actually smarter and cleaner to keep them on 2 separate GoBoards than it is to try to have multiple tabs. Plus, all the students will get the entire PDF, and you don't necessarily want the kids who are trying to get economics tutoring to get all the calculus notes too, right? It doesn't make sense, you know? So I'm trying to keep that organized. Do we think that helps? Okay. So a couple other things to think about. So you've got the pen tool, various thicknesses. You can also use the laser tool. So I like the laser tool because, one, I tend to point at the screen, but no one sees me when I point at the screen. You know, our fingers, it's amazing. So I'm like, right there. And they're like, I don't see what you're pointing at. I'm like, oh yeah, good point. So yes, right here with the laser pointer, one, it helps to draw your attention, but two, also it's not the pen tool. So if I was using the pen tool to do this, I'd be writing all over the board. And so the laser tool actually has a great function in that, you know, it doesn't actually write on top of your work, which is really great. Other basic tools, we have a shape tool. We do have hexagon and octagon. So for those of you working in chemistry, I know that's a really important shape. So we do have that. The text tool, different shapes, different sizes. So you've got, you know, a lot of, you know, different things that you can do. So if I was typing, hello. So if I was typing here, I can enter, I can hit Shift Enter, and it'll actually let me continue this text box. So Enter closes the text box out, but Shift Enter will actually bring you to a new line. So just a little trick for me if you're using the text tool, which I tend to use it quite a bit. Select, you can pick one thing, but you can also highlight and pick a bunch of things and move them. So that's great. And if you're trying to, you know, manipulate or make room on the board, that's an easy way to do it. The eraser erases whatever you're working on. So you can do little pieces. If you say, oh, I didn't mean to erase that, you can do Control Z or Command Z, or you can do, we have an undo and a redo button. So the eraser has different points. So you can have a really big eraser, or you can have a finer eraser, just kind of depending on, you know, what you're working on and what you're trying to delete. We also have a clear button. I will say students happen to find this pretty frequently. And so they'll just clear the entire page and you're like, oh my gosh, there goes all of our work. Just Control Z, Command Z that back and you'll get everything back. Don't worry. But they are amazing at finding that. So again, we're not going to want to clear the page, right? We're going to want to add pages. So just realize that you can, you know, keep adding pages. So that's it for basic tools. I'm going to go to more tools in a second, but I'm going to check in with Elizabeth and see if we've got any questions.
Yep. Request to demonstrate the erasing text feature, how to get rid of text that you've created.
I mean, it works just by clicking it. So it works the same way. Now it is going to delete the entire text piece, right? So because I chose to continue new lines, it will delete all of it. If instead I wanted to go in and change something in here, I could actually bring my cursor here and then I could use my, you know, arrow keys or whatever. And so then I can go back and say, oh, okay, you know, we just want to delete this one line. Great. I can do that. So, yeah.
Good. Okay, great. And then we did have a question, and I'm not sure I fully understand, so I'm going to punt it to you. Will the ability to have multiple cameras be returning to GoBoard? And I'm not sure I understand the multiple cameras question. So if you don't, we can ask Casey to explain, but maybe you do.
I think I know what they're talking about. So having the ability to be able to be logged in on multiple devices. So for instance, you're trying to be on an iPad and a laptop at the same time. We cannot do that right now because of AWS Chime, the audio video provider that we're using. It does not allow multiple cameras from the same IP address. So that is a limitation of the technology that we're using. Yeah, Sorry
Okay,
about
great.
that.
And then last question on to erase text, must you click on the visible text or anywhere on the invisible text box? I think just how Melissa showed it, where she's just hovering around it.
Yeah, anywhere near it, to be able to, and then I can just use my arrow keys to decide what I want to delete. So, and that's
Okay.
something, go in and play around a little bit and you'll kind of find out the ways that you use it. I think that's one of the things that we've always encouraged with GoBoard is that you get better by using it. So if you haven't used it yet, just go in and play. You can't break it. And so it's a good tool to play around and use. And as you tutor more and more, like I tutor a lot of geometry on here. So like I've got like definitely quick ways that I do certain things. So awesome. Any other questions before we move to more tools? No? Okay, cool. All right, so more tools. Let's do it. All right, so we have a scientific calculator from Desmos and we have a graphing calculator from Desmos. Both of these calculators are unique in that not both users, or not all users who are in the board are going to see it when you pull it up. So when you pull it up, it's a personal calculator. So the student could pull it up and I could pull it up and we could both be doing two different calculations. Now, there's some pros to that. There's definitely some cons to it too. If you're trying to teach them how to use it, you might want to, either maybe take a snapshot or do something else. I actually just talk my students through it. So I'm like, okay, pull up the calculator. Great. See the button that has the N over the square root symbol. That's actually how we're going to do, 4 N. And then now you can click that and we're going to take the cube root of 72 or something, right? So I'll talk them through it, and that generally seems to work. But that is a limitation of the Desmos calculator. So the cool thing is, though, with the graphing calculator, we can pull up an equation and I can insert that graph, but then that graph can actually be passed back and forth. So it is a collaborative tool because I can actually pull it up. I can see the equation that the students put in, and I can say, actually, no, what we wanted really was, we wanted this instead. And I'm going to insert it, stick it back in. And so you can pass the graphing calculator between students, between you and the student. But that's a nice feature to have there. And then I can move this piece. I actually made that look really weird. I can shrink it, I can move it, I can do, whatever I want to it to manipulate it on the board and do what I need to do if it's too big for you. So in terms of more tools, the import feature, there's quite a few ways to get stuff onto the board. So one of the ways is to search for an image from the web. So instead of going out and opening my browser and going and finding something, I could actually just pull it directly into the board. And the other day I was looking for a 30, 60, 90 triangle. And so I'm just going to search for it in here. And I'm like, yeah, that looks like a really good image. I think I'm going to use it. Super. And now I've got it here. And I'm going to go ahead and put that in my board. I don't have to go find it, download it, and upload it, right? I can pull it directly from the web. And now I've got this opportunity where I can mark on it and, say, okay, this is the corresponding angle that goes with that side. This is the corresponding angle that goes with this side, so now I can mark on top of the image. Other ways to get images in are you can upload a PDF or an image from Dropbox, Drive, Evernote, from their computer itself. So you have a lot of ways that you can get, stuff into the board and onto the board. And then the coolest way probably is to take a photo. So a lot of times students will do that whole like, see here where I did this, and they hold up the work, right? And they're trying to get you to, see what they wrote. Instead, they can just take a photo with their cell phone and they can text it to this phone number, and it'll ask them, what for a code, and they put in the code. So it could be, whatever university you're at or whatever center, and then underscore, and then it's the 6 alphanumeric combination of the board. And then it puts that image onto the board, and then you can blow it up and you can draw on top of it and, do whatever you need to do. So texting to the board is a pretty cool feature. Students really like it. And it makes it a lot easier when students are like, well, like I want to see how they went wrong on the problem, and I need to actually see the work they did, in order to see that. So a few other things, you can edit the background in grid. We defaulted to a gray scale background, to a charcoal background, because it's actually the easiest on your eyes. So in terms of research, we know that this is the best one, but if you really want white, go to town. You can also pick no grid or different grid lines. So you could pick like a larger grid or no grid. No grid is really smart because our lines snap to grid. So if you're ever wanting to draw stuff and you don't want it to snap to grid, just go ahead and take the lines off of here, take your grid off, and then it won't snap to grid, which is really great. We do have a ton of keyboard shortcuts. These were created specifically for GoBoard so that they don't interfere with the other processes on your computer. So if you want to easily get to the pen tool, you could use like Command P or Control P. You could get to the laser tool or the text tool really quickly. So these are actually really nice tools that you might be interested in using. So keyboard shortcuts are great. And then the reference library, we have a lot of resources in here that you're more than welcome to use. So there are, for statistics, there's Z tables and T tables. For trig, unit circles. We actually have 2 new things, LaTeX mathematical symbols and a quick guide to LaTeX. So if you've never used LaTeX or your student hasn't and you want to show them how to use it, this is a great, resource to have. We've got resources in here for accounting and finance and economics. You can actually add your own files as well. So you can just click add your own resource, and then that will be available to you as a tutor across all of your boards. So anytime you're logged in as a tutor, you're going to have access to your files. So I use a lot of obviously I told you guys I tutor in geometry. This handout has 2 pages, so I can decide which page I want. I could do all the pages, or I could just insert the formulas, and I could do that. So when that inserts, then I can move it around, manipulate it, take it, and decide what I want to do with it. So I probably will push it to another page just so that it's not on this page. All right, so we have a few other things. There's a timer. So if you have a hard time staying on time and I really need that timer to show me that I'm about to, go over time or something, then that's really smart. I also think this is great for when you have a student who's not respecting your time and they, need to be kind of kept on track. And so this is a really great tool and strategy to use. I find it stressful. It's a countdown timer, which reminds me of MacGyver. So anyways, I can't use it personally, but there are lots of people who love it. All right, I'm going to take a breath there and see if there's questions. I'm going to go to some of the other tools in a minute, but I just wanted to see if there were any questions in the meantime. And get my grid back while we're doing that.
We had a question about where the images are pulled from, and I actually do not know officially where those are on the web, if it's using a service or if it's just an internet search.
That's a really good question.
I know.
I mean, it's an internet search for sure, but I think we use like a plugin or a tool for that. So I'm not sure if it's pulling it from Yahoo. I mean, it's not pulling it from Yahoo, but like from Google Images. But it's definitely pulling it from somewhere. But we can find out. We can take your name and let you know. So.
And then the timer. Can it be edited or manipulated? And
you can edit and manipulate how much time it is, but there's really not much else you can do other than that. You can move it actually. So you could actually, well, let me see if I can I move it? Actually,
yeah, I think you can.
Yeah, I don't think I can actually. I think that's its permanent location.
Okay.
I can restart it and I can pause it and I can make it go away. But so good.
Okay. Well, I'm going to see if I can get an answer to that question while we're
okay
in our session, and We have an
Hey,
answer for you. Great.
very nice. All right. So math tools. So there's a few other math tools. We have an equation editor. This does use LaTeX commands. So if you know LaTeX commands, you can just start typing them, but you could also use any one of these drop-down pieces. So I could insert this and I could say, I could actually use this, 72, great. So that seems like a really silly way to add an equation to the board, but it's really silly for a very simple fraction. But when you're doing much more complicated equations, it's actually really useful. So the equation editor is not made for basic or simple math. It's really made for more advanced math, especially those like when you're doing like limits or any sort of like, sigma notations or things that students are like, I don't know how to draw that, that symbol with Greek letters. So that's, useful to be used there. For math, we also have Wolfram Alpha. Now that does pull from Wolfram Alpha. And so we can pull, a chemistry or a physics example. It's going to pull that data. You can search for them as well. And then it's just going to put that on the board. And then we can have that as a resource on the board, which is nice. So then again, you don't have to go out to go find it. We do have a number line tool. We have both a manual and an automatic number line tool. So again, we're covering the gamut on math here, right? The manual tool is kind of fun because if you pull to the left, it does negative numbers. And if you pull to the right, it does positive numbers, which is kind of funny. You can fix the scale and scope. Or you can use the automatic number line, which then allows you to say, okay, I need a number line from -10 to +10. And then it's going to go ahead and insert that. Hello. Nope, don't do that. It's going to go ahead and insert that number line. See if I can get it the way that we want it to. So, all right. So that's it for math. For chemistry, we have a bond drawing tool and a curved arrow tool. We have triple bonds, double bonds. We've got all of the symbols that you need to make chemistry tutoring hopefully faster and easier, so you're not having to hand draw those things and your students aren't either. And then for physics, all the same tools. And then the only other tool I'll talk about is the table tool for business. So here we can insert a table, and this is actually one of those collaborative things where I can actually type in here and then I can insert this table, and then another student could come along and they could click on the table and they could put some data in, and then they could paste that table back in. And so then we have this really nice table that we can then, go ahead and, we can collaborate on and work on. So I think that's it for the general stuff. A couple other things I'll say, you're going to want to make sure that your students actually leave the board. So they'll need to either close out the tab. There is under more tools a log out button. There's also an in session button. So let's say that you know that one of your students is really terrible about logging out. You could just click the in session button and it'll kick everybody out of the room. What that does is it allows the PDF to be processed and sent to the student. The PDF is an in-state PDF. So how you leave things when everybody has left is what the PDF will look like. But if you, before you leave, clear all the pages, well, then guess what? The PDF is going to be blank. So know that you need to end the session or everybody needs to leave, and it needs to stay like that so that the system can take a picture of everything and then send it to your student. So I just wanted to bring that up. I think Elizabeth has a couple of links that she'll put in the chat. One of them is to the GoBoard user manual. This is a great thing that you can give to students, but you guys can refer back to as well. And then one of the other things is our Online Tutor Essentials course. It is a course designed, it's a short course, it's under 2 hours, and it's designed to help you be a great online tutor. So it's got a lot of best practices and ways that you can build rapport and set goals with students. And it's a really nice short course that I think could, a lot of people could benefit from. I actually just ended up I helped build it in the summer, but I hadn't taken it. So I actually took it last week because it was really great. So any questions Any other questions? I can probably see.
Yes, I
Yeah, we
have a question. I teach Spanish and other languages, but I don't see any accents that I could use for the languages.
That is a very good question. So under the text tool, I want to say that's a good question. I think that there's some keyboard shortcuts that you can do for like an A with it, like an accent mark over it, or an N with a tilde. If you can make sure to put that question in the chat with your name and your email address, then we can get back to you on that. And we'll make sure that, that we can address that.
A couple of other questions that have come in is compiler for programmers. We don't have anything like that right now, programming languages, but I think it's worth noting that we're always looking for new ideas. And I think programming or computer language, application for coding has come up before. It's certainly been something that's been discussed for the future.
Yeah, I think that if anyone can point us towards like an open source compiler or something that would be, the compilers we've looked at before had a pretty hefty price tag on them. And so it needs to be something that we, can gain access to, because we provide GoBoard for free or very, very cheap. So it's definitely something where, we would want to get some recommendations on that for sure. So.
Great. A couple of other things. I'm trying to respond here as we go, but I think others will have these questions. Only the host has access to the end session button. That's not true. It's in the More Tools section, so anyone could access the More Tools.
Yep.
Okay, so anybody can end the session. And I think there's a question on the active links being on the board itself, if you can place an active link in a board.
I don't think you can. That was actually something that we were talking with the tech team about. It's come up recently. You could definitely put a link in the chat and then they could copy and paste it out. I think that right now the chat would probably be the best place for that. Good question.
But we also had a question about the links, and I think it's worth noting, I don't think we've talked about the links being permanent and the application for that. So maybe that's a good place to talk about that and maximum number of participants.
Yeah, so right now you can have up to 5 people in a board. So that would be you plus 4 students. The link is a permalink, so you can come back to this board. I did mention in the beginning that we designed this so that you and a student could come back. So if Elizabeth and I are meeting about econ, this is going to be our link, and we're going to come back here every Monday, at 7, and she's going to have access to this link. So, this link doesn't go away, and your students can actually access the link between sessions. So one of the nice features of that is that they could come in and they could put some problems that they've had. So I've had students do that before where they're like, oh, okay, I'm going to go ahead and on page 3, I'm going to copy and paste a couple problems that I was having issues with, so that by the time we get to our tutoring session, there's work for us in there. We've got stuff that we can do. You could do the same as a tutor. You could put some practice problems in there and have them work on it, asynchronously over the week and then come back. So yeah, the link being persistent is really useful.
Very good. I think we are caught up.
Awesome. Great job, everybody. I'll go ahead and stop sharing. So any other questions? Oh, nice tip, David, about using an international keyboard. So.
Okay, and I believe I have an answer on the More Tools send in or importing a file. It's searching for images from Bing Images API. So it's using Bing. So thanks for asking that. We had not been asked. I had no idea.
One of the lesser used search engines, but yeah. I'm sure they had some sort of easy widget. And then there's a good question. If you log onto the board and you add things, would a PDF be created and sent every time? No, the PDF is only sent when there's at least 2 people in the board. So there has to be 2 people in the board for the PDF to be generated. So if one student is just going in and asynchronously adding stuff, or you're going in as a tutor, it's not going to create that PDF, which is great, because that could get a little annoying. So good questions, everybody. And then we are going to be taking one of these recordings and making it more widely available. So if there's, one of these that we think is really stellar, then we'll make sure, I think, by the 3rd time we do it, we should be like super duper pros. I don't know. But I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording here so that we keep this one nice and clean. And